This story is titled, My Fiancé Mocked My Job in Front of Her Friends. She smirked, Oh, he just works in a pathetic cubicle all day. They laughed. So I played along, but this morning she showed up at my office to apologize, only to find out I'd been promoted and moved across the country without her. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Look, I'm not the type to air out my dirty laundry online, but this shit's been eating at me and I need to get it off my chest. You ever think you know someone inside and out? Then they do something so out of character it makes you question everything? Me and Valerie had what I thought was solid. We met 3 years ago at my buddy's housewarming. I'm a construction foreman. I run crews building luxury homes and high-end commercial projects. Not glamorous to some, but it pays well, and I'm damn good at what I do. When we first started dating, Valerie couldn't get enough of my job. She'd run her hands over my calluses and say how sexy it was that I built actual things with my hands. You're not like the other guys I've dated, she'd tell me. They just stare at spreadsheets all day while you're out there creating something real. She loved introducing me as her builder boyfriend and would brag to her girlfriends about how I renovated her bathroom in a weekend. For my part, I respected Valerie's corporate marketing gig. Sure, I didn't understand half the buzzwords she used, but I could see she worked hard. I made good money, more than her actually, so I took care of most of our expenses. Nice dinners, weekend trips, even helped with her student loans. We had a system that worked. I thought we had mutual respect. 3 months ago, I proposed. She said yes, cried, posted all the ring pics on Instagram. Everything seemed perfect. Then came that fucking dinner party with her pretentious friends and some co-workers. It was one of those upper middle-class get-togethers where everyone tried to outshine each other. Who had the best career, the best stories, the best vacation plans? I never particularly liked these events, but I went because Valerie wanted me there. But let me mention that Valerie had been acting weird all week before it. Kept bringing up her boss, Greg, telling me how I should network more and think about my career trajectory, like I was some kind of project she needed to fix. I brushed it off, figured she was just stressed about work. When we got to the party, I immediately felt out of place. Everyone was in these sleek business casual outfits talking about market trends and equity packages. Valerie started acting different, kept a little distance from me, laughed louder at everyone's jokes, name-dropped her company every 5 minutes. I was grabbing another drink when I overheard her in the kitchen with her friend Taylor, the one hosting the party, and some dude named Ethan from her office. They didn't see me. So you guys are engaged now, right? Ethan asked. What does your fiancé do again? I waited for the usual. How I manage teams, how I've worked my way up, maybe even a brag about the multi-million-dollar project I just finished in the historic district. But instead, Valerie let out this weird little laugh I'd never heard before. Oh, Ryan? He works construction. You know, hard hat, yelling at guys digging ditches, that whole thing. Taylor giggled like she had said something hilarious. Wait, like, he's actually out there with the workers in those neon vests? Valerie nodded, swirling her wine. Yeah, it's very blue collar. Not exactly executive material. Ethan smirked. Must be interesting conversations at dinner. Oh, we don't really talk about his work, Valerie said with a dismissive wave. It's also basic. Greg says people who do manual labor just don't have the vision to advance, you know. I stood there frozen, drink in hand, watching my fiancé mock everything about me to impress these pretentious assholes. The same job she used to call sexy and real was suddenly something to be embarrassed about. I could have called her out right there, could have made a scene. Instead, I walked into the kitchen casually, like I hadn't heard shit. Hey babe, what are we talking about? I said, sliding my arm around her waist. Valerie tensed up. Oh, Ethan was just asking what you do. I looked him straight in the eye and smiled. I run construction teams, currently managing a $12 million commercial development downtown. There was an awkward pause. Valerie looked like she wanted to disappear. That's interesting, Ethan said, clearly not finding it interesting at all. It's just a job, I shrugged, acting like it was no big deal. Pays the bills. We made small talk for another minute before they moved on to corner someone else. Valerie squeezed my arm a little too hard. You didn't need to brag about the budget, she whispered. Just answering his question, babe, I said, keeping my voice light. For the rest of the night, I watched Valerie perform for her friends, like I was some kind of embarrassing secret she had to manage. The woman who used to proudly show off pictures of projects I'd built was now practically apologizing for my existence. I drove us home in silence. Valerie didn't even notice. That night, lying next to her in bed, I realized our whole relationship might be bullshit. She wasn't with me because she respected me or what I did. She was with me because I was reliable, stable, the guy who would pay for dinner and fix her sink while she looked for something better. And that's when I started making my plans. Because what Valerie didn't know, what she never bothered to ask about, was that my pathetic construction job had caught the attention of one of the biggest luxury developers on the West Coast. They'd been recruiting me for months to become their director of construction operations. I hadn't told her yet because I was planning to surprise her. But after that night, I decided she didn't deserve to know. And she definitely wouldn't be coming with me when I left. I smiled in the dark as she slept beside me, completely unaware that her mask had slipped and that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The morning after that dinner party, I woke up before her. I watched her sleeping there, all peaceful and shit, completely unaware that I'd seen behind her mask. See, I'm not the type of dude who explodes when he's pissed. Never have been. My old man taught me that real power isn't in showing your hand. It's in making your move when no one expects it. And that's exactly what I plan to do. I slipped out of bed and made coffee, my mind racing through every moment of our relationship. All those times Valerie had jokingly suggested I look into management roles away from the dirty work. All those subtle comments about how her college friends were buying vacation homes while I was still swinging hammers. The way she'd change the subject whenever I talked about my latest project, but expected me to listen to hours of her marketing bullshit. The signs had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see them. What really fucked with my head wasn't just the disrespect. It was the fact that I'd given this woman everything. I paid for most of our expenses. I fixed shit around her place. I even helped her brother move apartments last summer when none of her fancy friends would get their hands dirty. I'd been there for every crisis, every late-night call, every time she needed someone solid. And this was how she saw me? Some blue-collar loser who wasn't executive material? But instead of confronting her, because I knew it wouldn't make any difference, how would you demand respect from someone who already sees you as inferior? I decided to become the perfect fucking fiancé. Yeah, you read that right. When Valerie finally dragged herself out of bed, I had breakfast waiting, smiled, kissed her forehead, acted like nothing was wrong. She probably thought I was too simple to catch the shade she'd thrown at me the night before, and I let her think exactly that. You seemed to have fun last night, I said casually, sliding her some coffee. Yeah, it was all right. Did you like my friends? She didn't even look up from her phone. Sure, I lied. That Ethan guy seems interesting. Her eyes flicked up at that. Oh? Yeah, he's pretty successful for his age. Just got promoted to senior manager. Good for him, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Maybe I could learn something from guys like that. She practically fucking beamed. Absolutely. That's what I've been saying. If you'd network more with professionals instead of just construction guys, you might get some better opportunities. I nodded thoughtfully, like she just dropped some profound wisdom on me. You're probably right. And that's how the next few weeks went. I became the eager student, pretending to soak up all the corporate bullshit Valerie and her precious boss Greg were feeding me. Greg says you should read this business book. Sure thing, babe. Greg thinks construction is a dying industry. Wow, that's interesting. Greg says real success comes from leveraging other people's labor, not doing the work yourself. Tell me more about Greg's philosophy. All while I was making my moves in silence. The developer had been after me for months. They'd seen my work on a complex commercial build that I'd brought in under budget despite multiple design changes. The offer was insane. Triple my current salary, full benefits, relocation package, company vehicle, the works. And they wanted me to build and lead their entire West Coast construction division from the ground up. Since I got the request, I'd been put them off, telling them I needed to discuss it with my fiancé first, family first, and all that shit. But after that dinner party, I was sure of my decision. I'm in, I told the VP of operations. But I need to handle some personal matters before I make the move. Can we keep this between us for now? They were more than happy to oblige. 3 weeks to wrap things up here, then straight to California. Meanwhile,
New life,
Valerie
new start,
was getting
new
bolder with her
everything.
disrespect. The more I played along with her improvement project, the more she seemed to think she could say whatever the fuck she wanted. Babe, did you see Ethan's new Tesla? She'd say while we were watching TV. That's the kind of car you could drive if you'd just consider moving into project management or something. Or, my friend Melissa's husband just got headhunted by this tech firm. He was just a programmer before, but now he's making decisions. That could be you if you just apply yourself more. The whole time I just nodded and smiled. Let her think she was molding me into something more acceptable to show off to her friends. But what really sealed the deal was when I overheard her on the phone with Taylor one night. I was supposed to be in the shower, but I'd forgotten my phone and walked back to the bedroom. Just don't know if I can do it long term, you know, Valerie was saying, her voice low. He's sweet and stable, but there's no ambition there. No drive to be more than he is, although he's been trying lately. Taylor must have said something sympathetic. I know, right? And Ethan's been texting me. Nothing inappropriate, just work stuff. But I can tell he's interested. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee to discuss this marketing proposal. My blood went cold, but my face stayed calm. So that's how it was. I wasn't just an embarrassment. I was temporary. A placeholder until something better came along. I walked quietly back to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and started planning exactly how I was going to disappear from her life so completely that she'd never recover. Once I made the decision to leave, everything became crystal clear. It was like I'd been wearing foggy safety glasses for years, and suddenly I could see all the shit I'd been missing. The more I watched Valerie, the more obvious her game became. She wanted the stability I provided while keeping her options open. She wanted my paycheck, my skills around the house, and my reliability. But she wanted the status that came with someone like Ethan, too. Too bad she couldn't have both. I started my exit strategy with a simple list of everything I needed to untangle from Valerie's life. Our finances, our apartment lease, our shared subscriptions, our future plans. Each one needed to be handled carefully without raising suspicion. So I opened a new bank account at a different bank, transferred most of my savings there, leaving just enough in our joint account to avoid raising red flags. Then I started redirecting my direct deposits to the new account, telling payroll there had been some weird charges on my old account. I also called our landlord to give him a heads up that I might be taking a job out of state, so I told him I wasn't sure if we'd be renewing the lease, which was up in about 6 weeks. He was understanding and said we could work something out if I needed to break the lease early. I also asked him to keep it between us since I was still sorting things out with Valerie. My new employers were sending over paperwork, contracts, and details about my relocation package. I gave them my buddy Nate's address for anything physical, used my personal email that Valerie didn't have access to, took calls during my lunch breaks at work. The offer was even better than I'd initially thought. Performance bonuses, a housing allowance for the first 3 months while I found a permanent place in San Diego, and best of all, complete authority to build their construction division how I saw fit. This wasn't just an escape plan anymore, it was a fucking upgrade. About 4 weeks after the dinner party, Valerie started getting more obvious with Ethan. Suddenly, she needed to work late at least twice a week. Her phone would ding with texts that she'd quickly check, then smile to herself. Once, I glanced over while she was texting and saw his name at the top of the screen. I didn't say a word, just filed it away. That weekend, Valerie suggested we have dinner with her work friends. Ethan and Taylor will be there, she said casually. And maybe a few others. It'll be good for you to network. Sure, I agreed easily. Maybe I can learn something from Ethan about corporate advancement. Her face lit up. She probably thought I was finally buying into her vision of who she wanted me to be. If only she knew. The dinner was at some overpriced bistro downtown. I played my part perfectly. Asked Ethan questions about his career, nodded thoughtfully at his advice, even jotted down notes in my phone like I was soaking up his wisdom. The key is to always be thinking about the next step up, Ethan explained, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. Construction guys usually hit a ceiling because they're too focused on the work instead of the career ladder. I nodded seriously. That makes sense. I've probably been too hands-on focused. Valerie beamed at me from across the table, probably thinking her project was working. Meanwhile, Taylor kept giving me these pitying looks, like I was some remedial student struggling to keep up with the big brains at the table. The whole time, I was thinking about how none of these idiots would last a day running an actual construction site, how they'd crumble under the pressure of real deadlines, safety issues, and the 1,000 problems that come up when you're building something real. But I smiled and played dumb. Let them think they were so much smarter, so much more successful. Because in 3 weeks, I'd be gone, and Valerie would realize exactly what she'd lost. As we were leaving, Ethan pulled Valerie aside for a quick work question. I pretended not to notice how their conversation looked a little too intimate, how his hand lingered on her arm a second too long, and it didn't mean anything to me anymore. At that point, I was already checked out from that relationship. In the car on the way home, Valerie couldn't stop talking about how impressed Ethan was with my new attitude. He thinks you've got potential, she said, like it was the highest fucking compliment in the world. He said he could see you transitioning into a corporate role with the right guidance. That's nice of him, I said, keeping my eyes on the road. Maybe we could have him over for dinner sometime? Just the 3 of us? He could give you more specific career advice. I almost lost it then. Was she seriously trying to bring her backup option into our home? But I kept my cool. Sure, if you think it would help. That night, I finalized the last details with my new employer. Start date confirmed. Relocation assistance arranged. Temporary housing secured. Everything was set. As I lay next to her in bed, watching her scroll through Instagram, completely oblivious to what was coming, I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. She really thought she had it all figured out. Keep me as the safe option, while exploring possibilities with Ethan. String me along with promises of helping my career while looking down on everything I'd built. The last 2 weeks of my life with Valerie were like being in some twisted sitcom where I was the only one in on the joke. With a couple of days left before my great escape, I kicked things into high gear. First order of business was our shared subscriptions. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, HBO Max, and whatever other digital parasites were feeding off my credit card every month. I didn't cancel them. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I changed the payment methods to cards that would conveniently expire right after I left. Next up was slowly moving my stuff out without raising suspicion. Valerie wasn't the most observant person to begin with. She once didn't notice I'd shaved my beard for 2 full days, but I still had to be careful. So I started with the things she never paid attention to anyway. My tools, most of my clothes, important documents, family heirlooms. Each day, I'd take a duffel bag or box to work that would conveniently end up at my buddy Nate's garage instead. Doing some spring cleaning? Nate asked as I unloaded yet another box. Nah, just preparing for the greatest vanishing act since Houdini, minus the water tank. Nate was the only person who knew what was really going down, and even he thought I was being a little cold about it. But then again, Nate hadn't heard his fiancée mock his entire career and existence to impress some douche in chinos. Speaking of douche in chinos, Ethan was becoming an increasingly prominent character in the tragicomedy of my life. Valerie was now texting him constantly, and apparently, he'd become the world's foremost authority on my potential career path. Ethan says you should really consider getting some certifications, Valerie announced one night over dinner, scrolling through her phone instead of actually looking at me. He says it would make you more marketable if you ever want to leave the, you know, physical labor behind. Wow, Ethan says that, huh? The same Ethan who wouldn't know which end of a hammer to hold? That Ethan? Is what I wanted to say. Instead, I nodded thoughtfully and replied, That's a good idea. I'll look into it. She beamed like she'd just successfully taught a dog a new trick. Good boy, Ryan! You're almost housebroken. The real eye-opener came one evening when I was grabbing my gym bag from the car. Had to park on the street since some genius neighbor decided their rusty project car deserved the covered spot more than my truck. As I was walking back, I passed by our open bedroom window where Valerie was on a video call with Taylor and a couple other friends from her office. Didn't mean to listen in, but when you hear your own name, it's kind of hard not to. And you should see how he's starting to dress differently, Valerie was saying, her voice all proud like she was discussing a successful science experiment. I think he's finally understanding that construction is just a stepping stone. He's even reading those career books I got him. The girls on the call all made those exaggerated "aw" sounds. This is like that show where they make over those clueless guys. One of them squealed. Valerie laughed. Basically. But seriously, Ethan's suggestions have been super helpful. He really gets what Ryan needs to do to move up in the world. Okay, but speaking of Ethan, another voice chimed in, one of her fake work friends. I forgot her name. What's going on there? He's clearly into you. Stop it! It's not like that, Valerie protested, but with that fake reluctance that screams, please keep asking. He's just being professional and helpful. Professional? Girl, he offered to take you to that leadership conference in his place. That's a 3-day trip to Phoenix. Whatever. Right now, I'm focused on helping Ryan see his potential. It's like a project, you know? Taking this rough material and turning it into something presentable. I stood there frozen, gym bag slung over my shoulder, listening to my fiancée discuss me like I was some fixer-upper house she'd bought in a sketchy neighborhood, helping me see my potential. That's rich coming from someone whose biggest career accomplishment was reorganizing the company's shared Google Drive and acting like a hacker. I walked away before they could spot me, a strange sense of calm washing over me. Nothing like hearing yourself described as a project to confirm you're making the right decision. With 1 week left before my departure, I started dropping subtle hints just to mess with her. Nothing obvious, just little comments that would only make sense in retrospect. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the future lately, I said casually as we were watching TV. Oh, Valerie perked up, probably thinking her Reformation project was working. Yeah, I think big changes are coming, the kind you can't even imagine. She smiled, completely missing the point. That's great, babe. I knew you'd start seeing things differently. If only she knew that the things I was seeing differently included her, our relationship, and my entire life trajectory. 3 days before I was set to leave, Valerie dropped her own little bomb. So, I was thinking we should have dinner with my parents next weekend, she said, scrolling through her phone as usual. Dad's been asking about wedding plans, and I thought maybe we could start discussing dates. The irony, though. Here she was, planning our wedding while simultaneously laying groundwork with Ethan, completely unaware that by next weekend, I'd be settling into my new apartment in San Diego. Sure, I said, suppressing the urge to laugh. Whatever you think is best. The night before my departure, I took her out for dinner. One last hurrah at her favorite overpriced restaurant, where the portions are tiny and the waiters act like they're doing you a favor by taking your order. I played the perfect fiancé. Attentive, charming, even romantic. I toasted to our future and watched her eat it all up like it was one of those microscopic desserts the restaurant specialized in. What's gotten into you? She asked, clearly pleased with my performance. Just feeling grateful, I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was grateful. Grateful that this was the last time I'd have to watch her take 14 photos of her meal for Instagram before actually eating it. The next morning, I woke up early and headed out to work, like any other day. The only difference was that my truck was packed with the last of my belongings. My resignation letter was in my pocket, and my one-way ticket to San Diego was already downloaded on my phone. I took one last look at our apartment building in the rearview mirror and felt nothing but relief. Just the satisfaction of knowing I was finally taking control. Valerie would wake up in about an hour, completely unaware that she'd just spent her last night with me. She'd go about her day, probably text Ethan, make plans with her friends, and assume I'd be coming home that evening like always. I'd been gone exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes when my phone started blowing up. I was sitting in an airport lounge waiting for my connecting flight, enjoying the feeling of having pulled off the perfect exit when the barrage began. Ryan, where are you? The landlord just called about the lease? Please call me. This isn't funny. Then came the calls, one after another. I silenced my phone and ordered another coffee. Each notification was like confirmation that my plan was working exactly as intended. I wasn't about to interrupt that beautiful process by actually answering. As the calls kept coming, I put my phone on airplane mode and focused on the present. The past was behind me, and Valerie was officially part of that past. When I landed after my first flight and turned my phone back on during the layover, the digital avalanche continued. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages, 4 voicemails, and now a new name had joined the mix. Valerie's mom, Linda. Great. The cavalry had been called in. I didn't need to listen to the voicemails to know what they'd say, but I listened to one from Linda. Valerie is absolutely beside herself. We don't understand what's happening. Please call us back immediately. This isn't like you. I deleted them all and texted Nate. Made it to my first stop. How's it looking on your end? His response came quickly. Bro, complete chaos here. V's already been by my place crying. Her mom's calling everyone we know. V's dad threatened to come find you and set you straight, until I pointed out that adults can leave relationships if they want to. I laughed at that. Her father had always treated me with barely concealed disdain. My daughter deserves someone who wears a suit to work, he'd once said within earshot at a family dinner. The irony of him suddenly wanting to track me down wasn't lost on me. Anyone else been dragged into this yet? I asked Nate. Everyone, man. She's on a full-scale manhunt. Called your boss, your coworkers, even that guy Diego you work with. Diego told her you'd taken a job somewhere else, and she completely lost it. So much for my clean exit. Seemed like Valerie was turning this into the drama of the century. Typical. On day 2 of my new life, Nate sent me a screenshot. Valerie had posted a long, dramatic message on Facebook about being worried about me, asking if anyone had seen me, saying this was completely out of character. She's playing the concerned fiancé card hard, Nate commented. The financial reality was clearly starting to hit. Good. That was exactly the point. Let her feel what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under her for once. Nate's play-by-play continued over the next couple of days, painting a picture of escalating chaos. V tried to get into your email to look for clues. Couldn't remember the password. Called me asking if I knew it. Like I'd tell her even if I did know. The Netflix, Hulu, Spotify purge hit today. She posted this whole rant about how some people are so petty they'd cut off streaming services during a crisis. Conveniently forgot to mention she never paid for any of them. She told her work friends that you took the engagement ring with you. Funny, since I distinctly remember you saying you left it on the dresser. Think she might have pawned it to make rent. Each message was like another domino falling in Valerie's perfectly arranged life. The structure was collapsing, and all I had to do was watch from a distance. After 3 days of ignoring all calls and texts, I finally decided to answer one of her calls. I wanted her to hear the truth directly from me, just once. My phone lit up with her name for what felt like the 100th time. I took a deep breath and answered, Ryan? Ryan, oh my God, where are you? What's going on? The landlord said, I heard you at the dinner party. I cut her off, my voice calm and steady. I heard what you really think about my job. About me. There was silence on the other end for a moment. What? I don't, I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Sure you do, Valerie. He just yells at guys digging ditches all day. That's what you told your friends, right? That I'm not executive material? That Greg says people like me don't have the vision to advance? Another silence, longer this time. Ryan, I was just joking around. You know I respect what you do. I let out a low chuckle. Respect? Nah, you wouldn't know respect if it slapped you in the face. But it's cool. Because guess what? I just got offered something real nice. The kind of opportunity people like you and your precious Ethan could only dream of. What do you mean? She asked. Let's just say my new view includes a penthouse office overlooking the ocean, a custom ride with my name on the lease, and more money than you and your little corporate buddies could ever throw at a dinner bill. They chased me for months. Because when you're actually good at what you do, you don't need to pretend to be something you're not. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? I heard her gasp. What? Ryan, why didn't you tell me? We could have what? You could have suddenly decided my career was worthy of respect? That I wasn't just some project for you to fix? That's not how respect works, Valerie. Please, her voice cracked. Just tell me where you are. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. You showed me who you really are, and I believe you. Oh, and you might want to start looking for a new place. Lease is up next week. Goodbye, Valerie. I hung up and blocked her number for good. It felt like closing the final chapter of a book I was done reading. Nate texted me later after a few days. Dude, V's a complete wreck. After you called her, she showed up at my place again crying so hard I could barely understand her. Something about you getting some big promotion? Said you were punishing her for a stupid comment? Also, get this. Ethan won't even look at her at work now. Heard from a buddy that works there that he straight up ignored her in a meeting when she tried to talk to him. Then he posted pics from some club with another girl from their office. Brutal timing. I couldn't help but smirk. Valerie had been hedging her bets, keeping me around as the safe option, while Ethan was the exciting possibility. Now she had neither. Then Valerie's dad called, and he actually surprised me. I let it go to voicemail, but what he said actually made me pause. Ryan, look, Valerie told us what happened. About that dinner, what she said about your work. I need to admit I might have contributed to how she saw things. I've always pushed her to find someone in a suit and tie, like me. That was wrong. She's a mess, son. Had to move back home because she can't afford the apartment. Can't you two at least talk? Too little. Too late, Bob. Maybe if you'd shown some respect for my line of work earlier, things might have been different. I didn't respond, but I did check social media once just to see how things were playing out. Valerie's status had changed from taken to nothing. Her usual stream of perfect life photos had stopped completely. According to Nate, the real-world situation was even worse. Her parents showed up with a U-Haul yesterday to move her stuff out. None of her friends helped, not even Taylor. Speaking of that snake, Taylor had the nerve to message me asking if you and I still hang out. Said she always thought you could do better than Valerie. These people are something else. Every update from Nate made me laugh my ass off. It became my favorite part of the day. Nate sent one more update a week later that painted the complete picture. Ran into V's sister at the store. Apparently V got taken off that big marketing project at work because she's been too emotional lately. Had to watch Ethan give the presentation she'd been working on for months. She's applying for transfers to other branches, basically trying to disappear from her own life. The irony wasn't lost on me. Valerie's carefully constructed social facade had crumbled. The fancy friends she'd tried to impress had abandoned her. The backup plan she'd been cultivating had ghosted her. The financial stability she'd taken for granted was gone. Everything she'd valued more than our relationship had fallen apart. Through all this, I completely rebuilt my life. My new office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific. My name on the door as a director of construction operations. 15 project managers reporting to me, overseeing sites across Southern California. Not bad for a guy who just yells at ditch diggers. What surprised me most wasn't the job. It was how I felt. No second guessing. No justifying myself. Just freedom. Nate flew out to visit one weekend after a couple of months since everything went down. We grilled on my balcony. You sure you don't want to know what's happening? With Valerie? He asked. I shook my head. That chapter's closed. But Nate couldn't help himself. She's still with her parents. Started seeing some financial advisor her dad introduced her to. I was surprised by how little I cared. It was like hearing about a stranger. Was my exit cold? Maybe. Heartless? Some would say so. But I call it self-respect. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't making a scene or hurling accusations. Sometimes it's looking someone in the eye, or in this case, telling them over the phone, exactly what they lost. Valerie had told her friends I had no ambition, that I would never be more than a construction worker. She'd compared me to Ethan and Greg, and found me lacking. She'd treated me like a project to be fixed, rather than a partner to be respected. Well, she got exactly what she wanted. A fiancé with ambition. I took my ambition and directed it exactly where it belonged, toward building a better life for myself without her. And all it took was walking away.